everybody. Thanks again for joining. We have a special guest today. We have Ramon Colomina, who is a good friend and a mentor of mine. Ramon is the CEO and founder of TCL. Ramon, thanks for joining.
Hey, Mark, how are you? Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for joining. Can you tell us a little bit more about your background?
Uh, yeah, sure, Mark. I'm an engineer by training, a management consultant for Fortune 500s by profession, and I would say a real estate, another type of asset classes investor, and a pilot by passion. That would be my quick summary on where I come from. And I was born and raised over in Europe, in Spain. So I'm a little bit also multi or polylingual, as I like to call it.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a little bit of where my background comes from.
Yeah, you have a man of many backgrounds and passions. Can you yeah. Can you tell us a little bit like how you got started with investing in real estate?
Well, maybe like many people, or maybe not, but I had a more traditional career path coming out of engineering school. I had several jobs with somewhat multinational and big corporations like Sony and British Telecom, and primarily and finally Accenture, where I was doing my job, a daily job, working for clients and exercising my engineering and other professional skills. And at some point in my career, I did have a little bit of an asset base or a pool of money, let's say, that I wanted to put to work. And many of us might have already forgotten, given the high interest rates environment we live in today. But we lived through a long stretch until recently. But it was a long stretch that started a long time ago in the early 2000s of low interest rates.
Yep.
So my liquid assets were not generating much interest or return. And I definitely quickly saw that I needed to find another category to invest in, and real estate was it. And I started dipping my feet in the water of real estate, and I liked what I saw. That started 15 years ago. And I had an interesting journey through it for 15 years. Now with interest rates rising, I'm changing my strategy again. We can talk about that later, but I definitely spent 15 years making my assets work a little bit for me in real estate.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. And just to share with everybody, like with your background and your experience in that, like that's one of like inspirations of like getting into real estate as well. So thanks for sharing your journey. Can you tell us, can you tell us a little bit more about like what from a real estate perspective, like what you're focused on and what was your experience?
Yeah, I initially had a lot of fun focusing on the leasing side. I came up with my own little strategy, because it was a side gig for me. And I know there's plenty of ways to go into real estate. The choice I made was to get into real estate in a way that would minimize my overheads. So I decided to test a lower overhead approach and strategy of leasing single family residential properties that were more on towards the high end. So the average monthly rent was high compared to multi-units or other kind of formats. So I had a low volume of contracts and properties or assets, but each one of them was generating a middle to higher end kind of return every month. And I did that in Colorado, which was my home state at that time. And sometimes it's also a matter of being not only in the right location, but also the right time. And Colorado was great to me for 15 years. Yeah, it still is.
Correct.
So I started in leasing. Then I did expand 7 or 8 years into me really getting comfortable with it all. I went into the brokerage side of the business too. I even got my own license, but I had a small team.
Yep.
Same thing. I went for low volume, low head count, minimal overhead. But my team on the brokerage side made good money and had a lot of fun. And so I ended up reaching a point where I had a high margin, low volume business on the leasing side. I had a low size, high volume on a transaction from a transaction standpoint, and low margin on the brokerage side. But we had a lot of deals coming through. The brokers made a lot of money. The margin for my company was smaller. But I had the mix of high margin and low volume of properties and high transaction volume and lower margins. And it was a good mix for 7 years. Yeah.
Wonderful. You definitely had a great career from a real estate perspective and have been touching like multiple parts like real estate. So I was wondering if you can share a little bit more about what, like some of the rewarding as well as challenging experience that you've had in your real estate career.
Yeah, the rewarding side for me was that to see that the strategy panned out and that the returns happen, and actually the returns help you grow the business. Um, I think I'm trying to think from a challenging side. I think it's more that you're always dealing with human beings on the leasing side and the brokerage side, and things can go awry quickly if you're not careful, and we have to spend time addressing things at the human side level, whether it's a renter and a tenant having issues of any kind. You're dealing with surprises, maintenance issues. Sometimes you even have. I remember once having a very nasty ice pack on a shady side of a townhome that would never go away through the winter. And I thought was really dangerous for my tenants. There was no way to get rid of it. And you're working with the HOAs and the snow crews that would show up every week. And then from liability when these things can happen to real risk, it's something that you need to be willing to be on top of things if you're gonna run a business that or be involved in investments that have human beings involved. And where it's not only bank accounts and software, for example. You have physical buildings, you have individuals, you have human beings. So there's risk sometimes, and you just you got to be a professional and stay on top of it and manage it properly, so that you can then enjoy the rewards financially too that come with it. But you shouldn't forget that aspect. So yeah, it's a little bit of work. It's a little bit of work, like anything you take on when you want your investments to pan out.
Yeah, that's, appreciate like that perspective. I know a lot of folks think that real estate is passive income, but like, from what you shared with us and from like what my personal experience was, anything but passive. It's in fact, like relatively pretty. Yeah. So shifting gears a little bit, we're, here end of November 2024. Can you share with us like what you're planning to focus on in 2024?
Yeah, as I was telling, with a changing financial environment, financial environment, economic environment, social environment, and geopolitical environment is always changing. But it definitely, for me, in the last year and a half, it's changed enough for me to take a different tack, and I'm shifting some of my investments to more liquid investments than real estate. I'm keeping a base of real estate investment, but I've decided that given where interest rates are and where they might be going and the volatility in markets, I'm moving some of those funds to other forms of investments that are more liquid. That are in more active markets where you can trade in and out of investment positions, move in and out of investment positions more dynamically. And so I'm rebalancing my portfolio where my little funds sit. And sure, I'm bracing for an interesting ride, because it's always an interesting ride, whether real estate or otherwise. You better be ready for the unexpected and unforeseen. You can drive a good upside or a good downside, and you'll be very ready to react to it. As you said, even that is not passive either. You just can't, at least in my philosophy, you just can't put money anywhere and go look the other way and check in a few minutes or days. You got to be on top of it. That's why I'm saying even minutes, because sometimes it has to be even seconds, depending what you're doing. So, and sure, sometimes you can take a more long-term view of things, and real estate helps with that. But even then, I mean, at the height of the real estate activity for me, I was keeping track of local laws and statutes, HOA rules for each one of our HOAs, board meetings that sometimes you don't think you need to attend or follow up on what happened. The more active you stay and informed, minute by minute, day by day, even if the entire investment is long term, the better you keep a sense of where that investment is navigating to. So yes.
Yep, that's great advice. Definitely stay on top of your investments, whether real estate, liquid investments, and whatnot.
Get lazy.
Yeah, don't get lazy. That's great advice. On that note, do you have any other advice for folks, especially for those who are looking to get started in real estate?
Yeah, maybe it's a good closing note. In my personal playbook, I would say I do take time to always remind myself that there's a difference between risk and leverage. Some people think that leverage is just another form of risk. For me, it's not. For me, risk is risk. Any investment has risk. And as long as you understand it or make your own assumptions and judgment call on the risk, that's one variable. For me, leverage is how much you're using, as we know, other people's money to play your risk game. And for me, there's a big difference. I personally have always had a personal strategy, and maybe because I'm very conservative, that keep to the both different. I've taken very risky positions in the past. Not so much with leverage on my side. And I try to not confuse the two. So I would say people should always feel free to do whatever they want with risk and leverage. But my counsel would be keep in mind that they're different and assess them differently, and make sure you're true to yourself on what you're doing with risk and what you're doing with leverage. And an example would be I go to a casino and play a number on the roulette, and I know it's 1 out of 35, 36 chances for me to win. That's the risk. The question is if I'm using my play money from my bank, or if I'm borrowing my neighbor's money to play that 1 out of 36. And that's the leverage piece. That's totally independent with the risk I might be willing to take. The question is what funds, what money are you using to do it? Because your outcome after a night of gaming, and I'm not a gambler after a night of gambling, but an outcome out of a night of gambling, if you're using your own play money versus you're using your neighbor's money, it might be totally different.
Correct.
For your financial well-being. And you could go 50-50. You could have half of your money and have borrowed half of your neighbors to go play that night. You could be 100% on your money, or you could be 100% on your neighbor's money. And that makes a whole lot of difference while you're still playing the same risk game. So I would just counsel, keep in mind and separate in your mind what you're agreeing to do for yourself with risk and with leverage, but keep it separate, do whatever you want. But for me, it's worked very well to always remind myself before investment that those two variables are two very different things.
Love it. Love it. Ramon, thank you so much. Really appreciate you spending some time with us and sharing your advice and experience in real estate.
You bet. Good talking to you always, Mark. Talk to you again soon.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.